Sometimes a single act of kindness can change everything, even bringing back the father you thought was lost forever. The morning sun barely peeked through the greasy windows of Mel's diner as Emily tied her faded apron and sighed. Her shift had just started, but she already felt the weight of exhaustion in her legs. She had been working double shifts for weeks, trying to pay rent and keep up with her college loan payments. Every time she looked at her paycheck, she felt like crying. It was never enough. But quitting wasn't an option. She needed this job more than ever. The diner wasn't fancy, just a small roadside place on the edge of town. The kind of spot where truckers, travelers, and locals all stopped for coffee and pancakes. The floor tiles were cracked, the neon sign outside flickered every few minutes, and the coffee machine made more noise than the customers. Still, it was home to Emily. She had been working there for nearly 2 years since her last office. JOB had fallen apart after her company went. Bankrupt, Emily pushed a strand of hair from her face and smiled as a couple waved her over. "Good morning. What can I get you folks today?" she said cheerfully, hiding how tired she was. It wasn't easy smiling all day, but she'd learned that kindness often meant better tips as she scribbled their order. Her eyes caught a small family sitting quietly in the corner booth. They looked out of place like they didn't belong to this dusty roadside diner. The man wore a button-down shirt that had been neatly pressed, though now slightly wrinkled. The woman beside him had 2 young kids with her, a boy and a girl, both restless and hungry. They weren't eating, just sipping on water and whispering softly. Emily noticed their worried faces and felt a tug in her heart. She had seen that look before, the look of people trying to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. After delivering her other table's food, she walked over and greeted them gently. "Hey there, can I get you something to eat today?" The woman hesitated. "We're okay, thank you," she said with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Emily nodded. But she could tell something was wrong. The man sighed and looked embarrassed. "We had some car trouble," he explained quietly. "Our wallets are in the car, and it's at the repair shop down the street. We just needed a place to wait for a bit." Emily smiled kindly. "I understand. Kids must be hungry, though. How about I bring them something light?" "On the house." The woman's eyes widened. "Oh no, we couldn't possibly," but Emily interrupted softly. "Please, I insist. You'd be surprised how far a pancake can go on a tough day." The family exchanged looks. The little girl's face brightened instantly. Emily winked at her, then hurried back to the kitchen before they could refuse again. She pulled out her notepad and scribbled down a quick order: pancakes, eggs, and orange juice. Her coworker Lisa raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to do that? You know Mel doesn't like free meals." Emily nodded. "I'll pay for it." They looked like they could use a break. Lisa sighed but didn't argue. She'd seen Emily do this kind of thing before. Despite struggling herself, she always found a way to help others. Maybe that was what made her different. She had a heart too big for her wallet. While the food cooked, Emily poured fresh coffee for her other tables and joked with a few regulars. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the family in the corner. She imagined what it must feel like to be stranded, stuck with hungry kids, unsure of how to pay for a simple meal. It reminded her of her own mother, who used to skip dinner so Emily could eat when she was little. When the food was ready, Emily carried the plates to the table and set them down with a warm smile. "Here you go. Eat up, okay? Don't worry about anything." The kids' eyes lit up and they dug in immediately. The parents looked touched, but also a little embarrassed. "You're very kind," the man said softly. "Thank you. We'll make it up to you somehow." Emily shook her head. "No need. Just promise me you'll help someone else someday," he smiled faintly. "That's a promise." As they ate, Emily went about her other tasks, wiping tables, refilling coffee, greeting new customers. But she couldn't help glancing at them every few minutes, feeling a quiet sense of peace. Sometimes small acts of kindness were the only good things she could control in her chaotic life. When the family finally got up to leave, the man approached the counter. He thanked Emily again, shaking her hand. His grip was firm, and his voice carried quiet respect. You have no idea what this means to us, he said, sincerely. You really don't, Emily smiled shyly. Just doing what anyone would do. The truth was, not everyone would. The man nodded once more and walked out with his wife and kids. Emily watched them through the window as they disappeared down the road. She had no idea that the man she had just helped was someone important, someone who would soon change her life completely. A few minutes later, her manager Mel came out from the back, holding a stack of receipts. Emily, did you pay for table 6 again? Emily hesitated. Yeah, just a small meal. They were stranded. Mel groaned. You can't keep doing that. You're not running a charity here. You know, we're barely breaking even.
I know,
Emily said softly. I'll make up for it. Take it out of my tips. Oh. Mel shook his head, but there was a hint of admiration in his gruff voice. You've got a good heart, kid. Just make sure it doesn't get you in trouble. Molly smiled weakly and went back to work. Her tips that day weren't great. Most customers had left small change, and one table walked out without paying at all. By closing time, she had made less than $40. After paying for the family's meal, she was down to almost nothing. Still, she locked up and stepped outside. She didn't regret it. The cool night air brushed against her face, and she took a deep breath, watching cars pass by on the highway. Somewhere out there, that family was safe and fed, and that was enough for her. Emily walked home to her small, dimly lit apartment, counting the last few bills in her pocket. Rent was due soon, and she wasn't sure how she'd manage, but she refused to let the worry win. Tomorrow was another day, another shift, another chance to make things right, as she lay down on her thin mattress. Her mind drifted to the smiling faces of those kids at the diner. That image made her heart feel lighter. She didn't know it yet. But that simple act of kindness would soon bring back someone from her past, someone she hadn't seen in years, someone whose decision had once turned her world upside down. But for now, all Emily knew was that she had done the right thing. And for the first time in a long while, she fell asleep with a quiet smile. Miles away from the little diner where Emily worked, a man named David Carter sat in his sleek office at the top of a tall glass building. The city below looked small from where he sat, like a moving painting of lights in motion. He was the CEO of a large company called Carver Industries, one that owned restaurants, factories, and dozens of businesses across the country. People looked at him with respect and even fear. To them, he was a powerful man who made big decisions without blinking. But sitting alone in that quiet office, with family pictures hidden deep in a drawer, David often felt something was missing in his life. It had been years since he had last seen his daughter. Emily, the divorce between him and her mother had torn their family apart. Emily had stayed with her mother, while he had thrown himself into his career. He told himself it was for her to build a future she could be proud of, but deep down, he knew he had let his ambition come before love. The few times he had tried to reach out, his calls went unanswered. Eventually, he stopped trying. He told himself she didn't need him. One afternoon, as David sat reviewing contracts, his wife Laura walked in with 2 kids bouncing beside Hertha, same 2 kids who had been stranded at the diner days earlier. They were still talking about the nice lady who gave us pancakes. Laura smiled as she placed a coffee cup on his desk. You wouldn't believe what happened while we were on our trip, she said. David looked up curious. Oh, what now? The car broke down outside of town. We were stuck near some small diner. I was so embarrassed. No cash. The credit card's locked. Kids starving. And then this young waitress came over and paid for our meal out of her own pocket. David raised an eyebrow. She paid for you. Laura nodded, her expression soft. Yes, she said she didn't want the kids to go hungry. She looked tired, like she had her own troubles, but she smiled anyway. It was touching. The little boy spoke up excitedly. Her name was Emily. She said pancakes make people happy. Something inside David froze. That name, Emily, it was such a common name, but the way his wife said it made his chest tighten. He forced a small smile. That's very kind of her, he said, pretending it was nothing. But the name echoed in his mind long after they left his office. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about that waitress. Could it really be his Emily? He knew she had struggled after losing her job years ago. Ironically, a job at one of his own companies. He hadn't even realized it at the time until it was too late. A cost-cutting decision had closed her department, and by the time he found out, she had already been let go. He had wanted to help, but shame stopped him. How could he face her when his signature had been the one that ruined her career? The next day, David asked his assistant to find out more about that diner. There was a small family-owned place near Route 12, he said casually. I want to know who owns it. His assistant looked confused. Of course, sir. May I ask why? Just curiosity, he replied. Within hours, David had the report in front of him. The diner's name was Mel's Diner. Staff list included a handful of part-timers and one full-time waitress named Emily Carter. His heart skipped a beat. Carter. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. He sat back in his chair, staring at her name. His daughter. Working in a rundown diner? Paying for strangers' meals while barely making enough to survive? David felt a mix of pride and guilt twist inside him. Pride that she had grown into someone with such compassion, and guilt that he hadn't been there to help her when she needed him. He thought about visiting her, just walking into that diner and seeing her again, but fear stopped him. What would he say? How could he explain why he had disappeared from her life? He wasn't sure she'd even recognize him anymore. That evening, while staring out his office window, David remembered the last time he had seen her. She had been 16, angry at him for missing her school play. She had shouted that she hated him, and he had stormed out instead of apologizing. That memory haunted him still. He had built a fortune, but he had lost the only thing that mattered. Meanwhile, Emily's life continued in quiet struggle. She had no idea her small act of kindness had reached her father's heart. Each morning, she dragged herself out of bed, walked to the diner, and served coffee to people who barely noticed her. Yet she kept her smile, because it was the only thing she could afford to give freely. One cold morning, the diner was busier than usual. Emily was rushing between tables when a man in a suit came in, clearly out of place among the truckers and travelers. He ordered black coffee and sat near the window, observing her quietly. She didn't notice him at first, too busy with other customers. The man stayed until closing time, then left a generous tip and a business card on the counter before leaving. When Emily picked it up later, she frowned. The card read, Carver Industries. David Carter, Chief Executive Officer. Her heart skipped for a moment. The name seemed oddly familiar, but she brushed it off. Big companies had big bosses, and she didn't have time to think about things like that. At his office, David sat staring at her photograph on his computer screen. He had quietly pulled her file from the company database. She had once been an intern at one of his branches years ago. The reason for her dismissal was listed under position elimination. He remembered that restructuring vividly it had been one of his toughest decisions. And now he realized he had unknowingly hurt his own daughter with that very choice. The next few days, David couldn't focus on anything. His meetings blurred together, and his assistant noticed his distraction. Sir, are you all right? He nodded, though he clearly wasn't. He had spent years building a reputation as a strong leader, but right now he felt weak. He had power, money, respect, but none of it could buy back lost time with his daughter. He decided to visit the diner again, not as a CEO, but as a father who had made too many mistakes. But before he could, fate intervened. His company was preparing to sponsor a new community program for small businesses. And one of the locations under consideration was by chance Mel's Diner. When the proposal reached his desk, David stared at it in disbelief. The diner's name stared back at him, along with a recommendation note about a hardworking young woman named Emily. Carter, who manages most of the place, felt like destiny was forcing him to face what he had avoided for years. He signed the approval papers immediately, but kept quiet about the connection. He wanted to see how things unfolded naturally. That night, as he drove past the diner, he saw the familiar flickering neon sign and her silhouette moving inside, cleaning tables after hours. He parked at a distance and just watched her through the window. She looked tired, but her smile when she talked to her coworker made his heart ache. She had her mother's kindness and his stubbornness, a mix that made her strong. For the first time in years, David whispered her name aloud. Emily. He knew it was time to make things right. But he also knew it wouldn't be easy. She had every reason to hate him. Still, something told him that the same kindness that made her pay for a stranger's meal might also give him one more chance. And so, without her knowing, David began to set things in motion, an opportunity. A visit, and maybe, if fate allowed it, a reunion that could change both their lives forever. The days at Mel's diner rolled by slowly, one after another, each one blending into the next. For Emily, life had become a routine she could do with her eyes closed, wake up early, walk to the diner, smile at strangers, and serve endless cups of coffee. But lately, even that rhythm was beginning to break. Business had dropped, tips were smaller, and Mel kept talking about cutting shifts. Emily felt the pressure tightening around her like a rope. Rent was due again, and she barely had enough to cover half of it. She'd already sold her old laptop and stopped using her car to save gas money. One Thursday morning, she came to work early and found Mel sitting in the corner booth with a stack of papers spread out on the table. He looked worried, his glasses sliding down his nose. "You're here early," Emily said, setting her bag down. "Couldn't sleep," Mel replied, rubbing his forehead. "Got a letter from some big company, Carver Industries. They're running some community program thing. Might be giving grants or partnerships to local businesses." Emily blinked. Carver Industries. That's the same name on that business card someone left last week. Mel looked up. Maybe it's connected," he said. "They're sending someone next week to inspect the place and talk about possible support. Could mean upgrades? Maybe even a contract for supplying their offices with food." "That sounds good," Emily said, forcing a smile. "We could really use some good news." Mel nodded, but didn't look convinced. "Yeah, but they'll probably just check the big city places. We're too small for them to care." Emily didn't say anything. She wanted to believe that something good was finally coming, but deep down she knew how things usually went. Big companies didn't care about little diners. Still, she tried to stay hopeful. Over the next few days, she worked harder than ever, making sure the diner was spotless. She even painted the walls herself after hours, using the last of her savings to buy cheap paint. Lisa, her coworker, laughed and said, "You're acting like some celebrity's coming." Emily smiled, wiping her hands. "Who knows? Maybe they are." Meanwhile, in his office miles away, David Carter reviewed the progress reports from the community outreach team. Mel's diner was officially on the visit list. He had arranged it quietly, without revealing his personal connection. He wanted to see her in her own world, doing what she loved. Without the shadow of his name influencing anything, he had spent nights thinking about how to approach her. Should he walk in and tell her the truth? Or start small, just to see how she'd react? Every plan he thought of seemed to fall apart the moment he imagined her eyes filled with disappointment or anger. A few days later, Emily's shift began, as usual, but the diner was unusually quiet. Rain tapped softly on the windows, and the smell of coffee filled the air. Around lunchtime, the bell above the door jingled, and a group of people walked in. They looked important, formal clothes, clipboards, and professional smiles. Mel straightened his tie nervously and whispered to Emily, "That's them. Carver Industries." Emily quickly wiped her hands on her apron and went to greet them. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Mel's Diner," she said with her usual warmth. One of the women smiled. "We're here to review the location for our community partnership program. We'll just be observing for a bit if that's okay." "Of course," Emily replied. "Make yourselves comfortable." They sat down and began taking notes while she served them coffee and pie. They asked questions about the menu, the customers, and the diner's story. Emily spoke passionately about how the place brought people together, how truck drivers and travelers often shared their stories over meals, and how Mel had been running it for 20 years despite the challenges. One of the men seemed particularly interested in her. "You really care about this place, don't you?" he said. Emily smiled. "It's more than a job. It's like family." The group left after an hour, promising to be in touch. Mel looked relieved but still uncertain. You did great, he told her. Maybe they'll actually help us. Emily just nodded. She wanted to believe that, but experience had taught her not to expect too much. That evening, as she was cleaning up, the door opened again. A man stepped in, tall and well-dressed, with gray at his temples and kind but tired eyes. He looked familiar somehow, but she couldn't place him. Sorry, we're closed, she said politely. He smiled slightly. I know. Just wanted a cup of coffee, if that's all right. Something about his voice made her pause. It was calm, deep, and strangely comforting. Sure, she said finally, turning back to the counter. I'll make one fresh. She poured the coffee. He looked around the diner like he was taking in every detail. You work here full-time? He asked. Yeah, she said. Must be hard, he said softly. She shrugged. It's not easy, but it's honest work. People come in hungry, and I can make their day a little better. That's enough for me. He smiled, and for a brief moment, emotion flickered in his eyes. You remind me of someone I used to know, he said quietly. Emily smiled back. I get that a lot. Paid for his coffee, left a large tip, and walked out. She watched him leave, confused. There was something about him she couldn't shake. The way he looked at her, almost like he knew her. The next morning, Mel came in looking excited. You won't believe it. Carver Industries called. They said we're shortlisted for a partnership. They're sending their CEO himself next week to finalize things. Emily's jaw dropped. The CEO? That's huge. Mel grinned. Yeah, but don't get your hopes up too high. These big guys can change their minds fast. All week, Emily worked tirelessly preparing for the visit. She scrubbed every corner, polished the silverware, and made sure the menu was perfect. But on the day of the meeting, she woke up feeling strangely nervous. When the black car pulled up outside the diner, Mel straightened his jacket while Emily adjusted her apron. The door opened, and the man from the other night walked in. Emily froze, the tray in her hand trembling. Mel stepped forward. Mr. Carter, welcome. We're honored to have you here, Mr. Carter. The name hit her like a wave. David Carter, the same name from the business card. The CEO. She stared at him, her heart pounding. He looked at her too, and for a moment everything went quiet. The sound of rain, the clinking of dishes, even Mel's nervous chatter, all of it faded. David smiled gently. It's good to see you again, Emily. Her mouth went dry. Again? She whispered, confused. He nodded slowly. You don't recognize me, do you? Emily shook her head, still trying to process. He took a breath. I'm your father. The world seemed to tilt. Emily's hands went numb, and the tray slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor. Mel's eyes widened, and the diner fell silent. Emily just stood there, staring at him, unable to speak. Her father? The man who had disappeared from her life years ago. The same man who had let her struggle alone, and now. He was standing in front of her, powerful, calm, and looking at her like she was the only person in the room in that moment. Everything she thought she knew about her life began to shift. Emily couldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the man standing in front of her, the CEO, the stranger who had just called himself her father. The noise in the diner faded until all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Her fingers trembled, her throat tightened, and for a moment, she didn't know if she was dreaming or awake. David took a small step closer, his voice gentle. Emily? It's me. I know it's been a long time. She blinked, still frozen. No, she said softly, shaking her head. This can't be real, it is, he replied quietly. I've been trying to find the right way to reach you. Emily's lips parted, but no words came. 1,000 memories rushed through her mind, the long nights her mother cried, the birthday cards that never came, the empty chair at her graduation. She had buried those feelings years ago, but now they came back all at once, raw and heavy. Mel looked between them, completely confused. What, Tyr, her father? David nodded slightly. Yes, I should have been here sooner. Emily's voice finally broke through the silence, shaking with anger. You shouldn't have come at all. She turned away, trying to catch her breath. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on her. David looked down, his voice heavy with regret. You have every right to be angry. I made mistakes. I thought I was doing what was best for you, but I see now that I was wrong. Emily let out a bitter laugh. You thought leaving was what's best for me? Do you have any idea what we went through after you walked out? Mom worked herself sick trying to take care of us. And you, she pointed at him, her eyes wet, you just disappeared. Like we never mattered. He didn't defend himself. His eyes glistened, and for a moment, the powerful CEO looked small, human, and broken. I know I failed you, he said softly. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't regret it. Emily wanted to scream, to cry, to tell him to leave and never come back. But a small, quiet part of her heart, one that had always missed her father, kept her frozen in place. Why now? She asked finally. Why after all these years? David took a deep breath. Because I saw what kind of person you've become. Kind, strong. The way you helped my family when you didn't even know who they were. It opened my eyes. You didn't owe us anything, but you still gave what little you had. That's when I realized I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know you. Emily stared at him, speechless. The idea that the family she had helped in the diner, the one she paid for with her own money had been his family, made her dizzy. That was your family? She whispered. He nodded. My wife, your stepmother, and your half-siblings. She took a shaky step back. So you just let me wait tables while your kids get to grow up with you? While I work double shifts to survive? His voice cracked. I didn't know where to start. I wanted to reach out so many times, but I was afraid you'd hate me. Her anger boiled over. You're right. I do hate you. I hate that you got to live your life while we struggled. I hate that I had to grow up thinking I wasn't enough for you to stay. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she quickly wiped them away, refusing to let him see how much it hurt. David looked at her with sorrow in his eyes. You were always enough, Emily. I was the one who wasn't. I let pride and work come before family, and I lost everything that mattered. The diner had gone silent. Even Mel didn't move. He quietly slipped into the kitchen, giving them space. David continued, his voice trembling slightly. When I realized you were the waitress who helped us, I couldn't believe it. I had to see you for myself. You've grown into someone incredible. You didn't need my money or my name. You became who you are through your own strength. Emily shook her head. Don't say that like it makes everything okay. You think showing up now makes up for the years you weren't there? No, he said quietly. It doesn't. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you the truth. And maybe, if you'll let me, I want to try to make things right. Emily turned away, tears blurring her vision. She walked to the window and stared out at the rain streaking the glass. Her reflection looked strange to her, like someone caught between the past and the present. Do you know how many nights I wished you'd show up? She whispered without turning around. Every birthday, every graduation, I kept hoping you'd walk through the door, and you never did. Now, when I've finally learned to live without you, you show up and say you're sorry? David swallowed hard. I deserve that. But I didn't come here just to say sorry. I came because I want to help you. I want to be part of your life again, if you'll let me. Emily turned, her face red with emotion. Help me? What, with money? You think throwing cash at me will fix everything? He shook his head quickly. No, not money. Opportunity. I want to offer you a job with my company. A real position. One where your hard work will be recognized. You deserve more than this diner. She stared at him, stunned. You think I want your pity? I don't need a job from you. I've been doing fine on my own. David looked around the worn diner, the flickering lights, the cracked tiles, the empty tables. Have you? He asked gently. The question stung. She hated that it was true. She wasn't doing fine. She was barely surviving. But she still lifted her chin. I don't need your help, sighed, pain in his eyes. Then let me earn your trust. Let me prove that I mean it. I'll start with the diner. Carver Industries can help renovate this place, bring in more business. It'll be under your management. You've already shown you know how to take care of people. Emily hesitated. Her heart warred with her pride. Part of her wanted to scream and push him away forever. Another part wanted to believe him to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had changed. She took a deep breath. "If you do this, it's not for me," she said firmly. "It's for Mel. For this place. I won't owe you anything." David nodded slowly. "Understood?" For a long moment they just looked at each other, the daughter who had grown up without a father, and the father who had finally realized what he had lost, before he left. He said softly, "You don't have to forgive me today, but I'm not giving up. I want to make things right, no matter how long it takes." Emily didn't answer. She just stood there, her arms crossed, watching him walk out into the rain. The bell above the door jingled one last time, and then he was gone. She stood in silence, her heart heavy. She wanted to hate him, but something deep inside wouldn't let her. His eyes had carried the same sadness she'd felt for years. As she began cleaning the tables again, her mind spun with confusion. Her father, the man who had abandoned her, was now the same man trying to help her rebuild her life. For the first time in a long while, Emily didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days were strange for Emily. Every morning, she went to the diner like usual, but nothing felt the same anymore. Her father's face kept flashing in her mind, the way he had looked at her, full of regret and sadness. She told herself she didn't care, that it was too late for him to make things right. But deep down, his words had left a mark she couldn't ignore. Mel noticed how quiet she'd become. She didn't laugh with the customers the way she used to, and her smile felt forced. "You okay, kid?" he asked one morning as he poured her a cup of coffee. "I'm fine," she said quickly, but her voice sounded tired. Mel sighed. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you and that fancy CEO guy, but don't let it eat you up inside. You're too young to carry that kind of weight." Emily gave a small, sad smile. "I'm just trying to figure things out." The following week, the changes began. A crew from Carver Industries arrived at the diner just like David had promised. They brought new furniture, repaired the broken lights, painted the walls, even replaced the old coffee machine that had been making noise for years. Mel was thrilled, though he tried to hide it. "Guess the big guy wasn't bluffing," said with a grin. Emily kept her distance from David's people, staying polite but cold. She didn't want to give anyone the impression that she was taking advantage of her father's help. She told herself she was only allowing it because it would help Mel and the others keep their jobs. One evening, as the renovation team was finishing up, David came by to check the progress. Emily was wiping down the counter when he walked in. She stiffened but didn't look up. "It looks wonderful," he said softly, standing a few steps away. "You've taken good care of this place." She kept wiping the counter. "It's not my place," she said flatly. "It's Mel's." "But you're the reason it's still standing," he replied. "Everyone here knows that." Emily set down the cloth and finally looked at him. "Why are you really doing this? Guilt?" He hesitated, then said honestly, "Maybe at first. But now, it's more than that. You showed me the kind of person I should have been all along." She crossed her arms. "You can't just fix everything with a few paint cans and new chairs, Dad." The words slipped out before she could stop herself. She hadn't called him that in years. David's eyes softened. "I know I can't, but maybe I can start by showing up this time." There was something about his tone, gentle, honest, that made her heart ache. For the first time, she saw not the CEO everyone respected, but the man who had once carried her on his shoulders and promised her the world. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "You don't have to. Just let me try to earn it." Over the next few weeks, David kept his word. He didn't pressure her or bring up the past unless she wanted to talk. Sometimes he stopped by the diner quietly, ordering coffee and sitting in the same corner booth every time. He'd watch her work, proud but silent, only leaving a tip and a small smile when he left at first. Emily avoided him, but eventually she found herself talking to him. Small conversations at first about work, customers, the weather, then slowly, deeper ones. She learned things about his life she had never known, that he had grown up poor, that he'd built his company from scratch, that he'd lost people he cared about because of his choices. One night, after closing, she found him waiting outside. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the air smelled of rain. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. For helping Mel. For helping this place. He smiled gently. I should be thanking you. You reminded me what real kindness looks like. She looked at him, searching his face for the man she remembered from childhood. You really didn't know it was me that day, did you? When I paid for your family's meal. He shook his head. No, but I'll never forget it. The way you smiled, the way you didn't ask for anything in return, it reminded me of your mother. She was like that too. Emily's throat tightened. Mom used to talk about you, she said quietly. She said you weren't a bad man, just lost. David's eyes glistened. She was right. I was lost. But I think I finally found what I was missing. For a moment they just stood there, the silence between them no longer heavy, but gentle. Emily didn't say anything, but she didn't walk away either. The diner flourished after that. The renovations brought in new customers, and business doubled. Emily was promoted to manager, something she had earned through her hard work and dedication. Mel joked that she was now the boss of the place, though he still signed the checks. David kept his distance professionally, but supported her quietly, making sure the diner had everything it needed to succeed. He told the press it was part of a community project, never once mentioning his personal connection. Months passed. Things slowly began to heal between them. It wasn't perfect, there were still awkward silences and moments of pain, but there were also smiles. Shared dinners and quiet laughter that hadn't existed before. One Sunday afternoon, David invited Emily to his home for lunch. It was the first time she had met his wife and her half-siblings since that day at the diner. She was nervous, but to her surprise, they welcomed her warmly. The little boy ran up to her and said, "You're the pancake lady?" making everyone laugh. Laura, her stepmother, hugged her gently. "We're so glad you came. David's been talking about you nonstop." Emily smiled shyly, glancing at her father, who looked both proud and emotional. For the first time, she saw a family that felt whole, not broken. After lunch, David walked her to her car. "I know I can't change the past," he said softly, "but I want you to know that I'll never stop trying to make up for it." Emily looked at him, then nodded slowly. "Maybe we can start with coffee. No fancy offices, no business talk, just coffee." David smiled, his eyes brightening. "I'd like that very much." As she drove away, she glanced in the mirror and saw him standing there, watching her go with the same proud look she remembered from long ago. For the first time in years, she didn't feel angry or hurt. She felt peace. The following morning, she returned to the diner, where the smell of fresh coffee and laughter filled the air. The neon sign outside no longer flickered, the seats were full, and the place was alive again, as she served a family sitting in the corner booth. The same spot where her father's family had once sat, she smiled to herself. Life had come full circle. She didn't know what the future would bring. But one thing was certain. Her kindness had changed everything. It had brought her father back, healed old wounds, and reminded her that sometimes the smallest acts of love could lead to the biggest miracles. And as she looked out the window at the bright morning sky, Emily whispered quietly, "Maybe second chances are real after all."